Hi everyone. Um, so with this video, we're going to talk about something that most people experience on this kind of journey, i.e., getting into better health, losing weight, that kind of thing. And it's the idea that at some point you have this feeling that you've gone backwards. And that might be because you've had a few days off. You might have been away on holiday for a week, or it might just be a sense that things aren't going quite to plan. The odd habit has slipped a bit. Your focus has drifted. You don't really feel as though you're on it as you were before when it was really going well. And then this thought arises. And I've come across this so many times in people who are trying to lose weight, where they go, right, I need to start again. Now, I want to pause there because it's an important part in someone's journey. Because what you do with that thought will shape so much that follows. And if people look at it honestly, it can come up several times on someone's journey to the point that they stop. So let's think about what starting over actually means. Now, it can sound very logical. It can even sound quite responsible. But if you think about it, behind that thought, there's a hidden message. As weird as this is going to sound, if you think about the thought, it's there though. And that is that everything I've done so far doesn't count. If you think you're starting over again, everything you've done to that point doesn't count. And that's simply not true. You cannot, you can't unlearn what you've already seen. You cannot unknow what you now understand. And as up to this point in your journey, you would have been learning tons of stuff. You'd become aware of things that, well, you're unaware of a lot of what you've actually been learning. So even if your behaviors haven't matched what you intended to do over a few days, your awareness hasn't gone away, and that's the key. Because you see, in light minds, we're not just talking about changing behavior. We're actually really focusing on helping evolve understanding. And once understanding shifts, that understanding always stays with you. It doesn't go away. So you can think of the analogy of walking up a hill, and it's a steady climb. It's not always easy, but you are making progress. You might be going sideways at times. You might have to go back to go slightly round, but you're making progress. And then you get tired, so you stop. You steady yourself. You take time out. Now, it can feel that you've lost ground. But the thing is, you haven't gone back to the bottom. Of course you haven't. You're still much further up the hill than when you started. And actually, you know much more about the path than when you started. You know what climbing feels like. You know where things get steeper. You know what works for you. That's all now in your experience. And that doesn't disappear. See, what's really interesting, even when people feel like they've fallen off, something subtle has shifted. And that's they notice more. They're beginning to catch their thinking sooner. They become more aware of patterns that they used to miss completely. For example, let's think you might notice emotional eating as it's happening, not after. That's really, really important. If you described yourself when you started your journey as an emotional eater, the chances are most of the time you don't realize that you're eating emotionally until after you've eaten emotionally. But when you're on your journey, you become aware that you're eating emotionally at that moment. And that's really important. You might begin to recognize thoughts that lead to decisions, the triggers that lead to decisions. You might recognize when you're being overcritical of yourself. That's all about awareness. And that growth has been taking place along the journey as you're going up the hill. So even when your behavior hasn't caught up yet, that awareness is still present. And it's the awareness that precedes the change. So you're noticing much more, and that means you're not going backwards. You're actually moving forward in a much deeper way than people think. People think that behaviors is the key to change. It's not. It's understanding that's the key to long-term change, which is really what I meant to say. What you're trying to do is achieve sustainable change, sustainable results. Now, it seems like that's your behaviors that are going to create that. But that, I use it a lot in the Light Minds program, the analogy of the iceberg. That's the bit that you can see above the surface. But the understanding through awareness takes place underneath, below the waterline of the iceberg. That's where the real shift starts to take place. So it's really important. Now, it's also worth challenging the idea of starting again, because that in itself can quietly create pressure. It can make your journey feel like a series of passes and fails. I'm doing well, then I mess up. I'm doing well again, I mess up again. I need to reset. I need to get back to day one. And that kind of thinking leads to frustration, and it leads to a ton of self-judgment, which can really get in your way because it creates all or nothing behavior. So instead of that thinking, what if nothing has gone wrong? What if this is just part of the process? What if in this moment it's exactly where you are meant to be in your learning, in your development, in your growth, to the end that you want to achieve? You see, because real change, successful long-term change, it's not linear. It doesn't go on a straight path. It's not a straight line upwards. It's a series of insights, pauses, recalibrations, and forward movement and backward movement. Where, and you take time out. That's really important. So you could try on a bit of a different perspective. Instead of saying I need to start again, just I'm continuing on the next step of my experience. And just notice how that feels. There's no pressure, no judgment. Just very quiet acknowledgement that you're still on the path. And the next step now begins. Nothing perfect, but there it is. So, today and for the next few days, you might want to think about something like this. What do you understand now that you haven't understood before? What have you noticed about yourself recently that wasn't there before? What have you become aware of? Now, these don't need to be huge things. They could be slight things, very small insights, because it's those little insights that are actually the building blocks. They're the things that over time accumulate to ensure long-term sustainable success. So if you've been a bit off recently, you don't need to start over. You're just continuing. Every step counts. Every moment of awareness matters. Your next step is available to you now. Trust it. Follow it. See where it takes you. Thanks.